Hello, friends. Welcome back to Floyd County Emergency Management. Today I'm joined by my friends from PAWS. Thank y'all for being here. So tell me what does PAWS mean and what do you do in our community?
PAWS is the Public Animal Welfare Services. We handle all of the animal control services for Floyd County and the City of Rome, as well as Cave Spring. We house and also manage the shelter, so all the animals that are impounded, surrenders, and things like that that come to us, as well as any kind of cruelty events that may have happened.
We're not always living in sunny conditions in Floyd County. Sometimes we have storms, sometimes we have snow, sometimes we have cold weather. So I thought it would be important for us to talk about what we should do to take care of our friends. What should a family do or a pet owner do to prepare before it even happens? What should a pet owner do for their animal that maybe stays outside all the time?
Well, it's kind of like child-proofing your home. You'll need to pet-proof your home. If there is a way for you to bring an animal inside, either in a room, a crate is probably one of the best things. But you also want to work on training that animal to know what he's coming into. If you just bring a dog that's been outside its entire life, and now all of a sudden you want to bring it in, expect that dog to do good inside the house at that point.
It's a new environment. You got a couch, you got tables, and all kind of stuff.
Yes, so I mean you don't want to bring a dog in and he chew your furniture up, or danger to itself get into something that it shouldn't be getting into. Getting a hold of an electrical cord or something like that. So crates work wonderful as long as that animal, it's big enough crate for that animal to stand up in, be able to turn around.
Right.
And I'm sure the animal will probably enjoy it.
So it doesn't have to be a crate, but if you've got the animal trained well enough, they could roam free if they're comfortable in that, and you're comfortable in that, being in the house, right?
That's correct. I mean, even if it's like a porch area that contains the animal, I mean, at least at that point, that dog is out of the elements.
And what elements are we looking at? We're looking at cold and wind and everything.
Cold, wind, rain, sleet, snow, and a lot of people don't realize that wind is an element. The animal, you've got to protect it from everything.
Dogs cool a lot faster than humans do. So what does that
Yes.
mean for them physiologically?
So frostbite and hypothermia will happen quicker than it will in a human. And I've seen deceased dogs that are outside, that were tethered, had shelter. They didn't have any bedding, but they did have proper shelter. But the hypothermia is real. I mean, it's like I said, for dogs, they cool. Their body cools down a whole lot faster than ours, so it's quicker to set in on them.
And when you say bedding, what do you mean? What does that look like?
Proper shelter would need to be 3 sides, a top, and a bottom. A lot of times when animal control goes out to a house, you'll see some boards up, the dog's there laying on the ground. Well, the ground's just as cold. I mean, the ground will freeze too. So when I say bedding, I mean like wheat straw. A lot of people, it don't contain the warmth like pine straw does. So we always recommend wheat straw, a blanket, a fleece blanket. You know, for cats, a lot of people don't think about cats. Cats are, they don't like to be contained. But a lot of people take a plastic tote like you get at Walmart. They'll cut a hole out in it and leave the top on it, or turn it upside down and put bedding in there for the cats to come in and out of during the cold.
You know, what I've noticed by a lot of your investigations is you use very scientific methods. When you go in to describe abuse cases, you're talking about standards that exist. What are some signs that your animal may be suffering from exposure, whether it's too cold or too hot?
Well, with being too cold, they're gonna ball up in a ball. They're gonna try not to move as much. You'll notice the body shivering just like in a human, but they're gonna be balled up. They won't move a lot because at this point, if they're laying on the ground, their body heat has changed the temperature of the ground. So they're not gonna. You'll see like wore out places where a dog's been laying. A lot of times they may be laying in leaves or even in the pine straw. So they're going to be trying to ball up as tight as they can to keep as much of that body heat in.
Right.
A lot of people go out and all they do is feed their dog. They don't think about that dog will be cold just like I'm going to be cold if I'm outside. That dog's got hair. Well, I mean, you go lay outside in that doghouse for several hours in 20-degree weather and see how you feel.
Yeah.
Take a blanket out there with you.
Right.
You're still going to be cold.
But, well, let's look at hot. What do you need to look at as far as the heat when it comes to your animals and when they need to come in?
They need to have, like he was talking about, a proper shelter so they can get out of the sun. But especially with the heat, sometimes that shelter can become like an oven. So they need a shaded area where they can get away from the sunlight and cool themselves off. They're going to have copious amounts of cold water. If their water bowl is sitting in the sunshine, that water's going to get hot and it's not doing them any good.
Right.
So you want to look and make sure that that dog's not excessively panting, starting to get really lethargic. That's going to be some signs of heat exhaustion where that animal needs to come inside and get cooled off immediately.
Right. The wind. We talked about the wind being. I don't expect folks to get out there with a some wind equipment to figure out how many knots we're looking at. But if the trees are going sideways, I think it's time to bring your animal inside, right?
You have hazards, even if it's warm outside. You still have hazards of a limb falling. I know Officer Gibson and I went out to a home one time, and the dog was tethered to the tree with a cable. Well, lightning struck the cable. It ran completely down the cable, and luckily, when the cable was laying on the ground 2 foot from the dog, and it stopped there.
Yep.
So had that dog been standing up, the dog would have been dead.
I think you made a good analogy. If you're not willing to be out there in that animal's place, then you need to consider what that animal's going through as well.
Correct.
Let's talk about the cold. How cold is too cold to be outside?
Once you start getting into freezing temperatures, at that point, if you know that those temperatures are going to drop down below freezing, you may want to consider bringing that dog inside the house. But again, preparing before you do that. When it starts getting cold and not below 32 or below freezing, adequate bedding. Adequate shelter, adequate bedding. Give them a way to get out of the wind. Give them a way of getting out of the rain with a blanket or wheat straw so they can contain that body heat.
Now, a lot of animals are built for that environment. They're just a species that's accustomed to the mountains and that sort of thing. Are these questions that y'all can answer? Should they go to a vet? What is the answer to that?
Everybody's got some type of internet access.
Yep.
That's your best way to get that information on the type of dog that you have. We know we have Huskies, Malamutes, and you see these TV shows where they're
Playing in the snow.
Yeah. So those dogs enjoy it. But you still have to provide that shelter. You have to give them an opportunity to be able to go in there and warm up. If they don't use it,
that's on them. They know their body the best.
Correct.
They know how they're feeling, and they know when to come in if they need to. Right?
Correct. Because I've been on a call where somebody called and said, "Hey, there's a dog standing out in the rain." And I go there, and yes, there's a dog standing out in the rain, pouring down rain, but he's on top of his doghouse.
What are some essential needs that you think your animal needs? And I know everybody's going to be different, but what would y'all suggest that people pack in an emergency go bag for your animal?
I want to make sure if that animal's on any kind of daily medications or anything like that you've got that packed up just like you would for your children.
Yep.
You want to go ahead and make sure that you've got even just a Ziploc baggie of food for that animal. That way you can provide it to them should you not be able to get to the store in the next few days.
Right.
If you have that indoor crate, this is part of the reason they are so amazing. You can pack that up, take it with you. That way if you're having to be in an emergency shelter or something like that, you've got a place to store that dog. I'd also recommend get a supply of pee pads. That way if you're not able to take that dog outside constantly, you can at least put some in its crate. It's got a way to use the restroom without making a huge mess. And, of course, leashes and collars.
Because if you're in a shelter environment, you're going to have a lot of animals, and you're going to want to make sure that your animal stays with you.
Yes.
Right.
And definitely tag or microchip those dogs.
Yeah, that's microchip is huge.
Tell me about. Let's talk about microchipping. What is that, and what does it mean for the animal?
Microchip is a very small device that's implanted underneath the skin of your dog. All of the animal control officers, all the veterinary offices, as well as the shelter, has microchip scanners where we can simply wave a wand above that dog. It shows us the microchip number, and we can link it right back to the owner. They can't, doesn't fall off like a collar. We don't have to worry about them losing it as long as you keep your information up to date. So if you move, you've changed that address in the system, or if you get a new phone number, change it in the system. As long as your information is up to date, we can definitively say this is your animal and we can get it back to you.
We're not talking about tracking here. This
No,
is
it's
strictly
not
for
GPS. It's
identification.
definitely not GPS. It's just for identification purpose. Number one, county just passed a new ordinance, the spay-neuter ordinance, and inside of that spay-neuter ordinance is microchipping as well. And I found it important to have that in there. State law says your animal's required to have a rabies vaccination on at all times. The majority of the animals that we pick up have no identification. Every animal inside of animal control or inside of PAWS at this point had an owner at some point. So those microchip, you may have 10, 15% compliance with a rabies vaccination. If we can get another 10 to 15% compliance with the microchipping, that's just another tool in our belt that we can help return these animals to their owners.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for being with us. We look forward to talking to you again for information from Floyd County.